Dedication. This one's for Sonny. You may remember him as Marigold. Chapter 1. No matter how hard you try to escape your roots, the truth is you are always heading home. No matter how far you go, no matter how fast you run, at some point, your path brings you back to the beginning. Maybe it's magnetism, some intangible force pulling you back, or maybe it's simply magic. God knows I've had enough of that. I may not understand magic, but I sure as hell can't deny it. Maybe my path home began the very day I jumped into the river and swam away, or maybe my journey home began here, crouched beside a wall in the pouring rain. My gun slapped to my side, sirens wailing overhead. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I need to rewind a few hours and go back to base. London City Police HQ. There were lots of smaller stations around the city, but my station, Westminster, was based at HQ. At 80 floors it towered over Big Ben and St Paul's, but was in turn dwarfed by the other city skycappers. Progress never stops, even when it should take a proper deep breath and pause. HQ was dedicated to security, forensics, judicial. The top 5 floors, P1 to P5, were purely for practitioners. They even had a penthouse that had PP on the lift button. It's probably an indication of my maturity level that delighted me far more than it should have. If they went by the common lingo of magician, they'd have double M, which at least sounds pleasurable. My personal term for the woo-woo squad would read WWS, which is close to wuss but not funny or accurate. They are scary individuals and don't find the term woo-woo amusing. Here on the 30th floor, we detectives run the business of keeping London safe. Hijacks, murders, kidnapping, smuggling, all the typical vices of a capital city in the 21st century. And as I was trying to catch up on some filing, it was my absolute pleasure to catch the attention of Captain John Wallace, head of the new recruits. "Barnaby, this is Cadet Oldershaw." I looked up, smiling politely. Wallace was standing too close, as usual. I pushed my chair back and stood up. No one wants to have a conversation that close to someone else's groin. As I stood, I noted he had tightened another notch on his belt. His diet was clearly working wonders, as he mentioned tirelessly. He was currently making few friends, but he outranked me and I didn't want to antagonize any senior officer with my upcoming assessment looming. Though I'd be blowed if I would volunteer any compliments. He had a habit of reading too much into them. Standing beside him was a young cadet in red. She was slim, tall, blonde, and somehow made the uniform look tailor-made. I wondered how often Wallace had mentioned how much weight he could press. She was standing to attention and looked very serious. So far I approved of her demeanour. Her hair was scraped back in regulatory fashion into a low bun, and I noticed she had clocked my long hair hanging loose and then simply blanked it out. At least she was good at keeping her own counsel. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I help?" The cadet was holding a large bundle of case notes, and I had a sinking feeling I knew what they were. Cadet Olderenshaw needs to brush up on her processing of various cases. Thought you could help. I'm pretty busy at the moment. I really wanted all my backlog cleared before I attended my interview. If I could show a capacity for time management and paperwork, these would be points in my favour. The cadet is having trouble shifting out which files we process and which we send up to the practitioners, and you are particularly capable in this department. He trailed off and I sensed a bit of wriggle room. "I'd love to, sir, but the Doyle case really needs to be prepared for court tomorrow. I just thought with your upcoming assessment, but if you're reluctant to help a struggling cadet..." It wasn't wriggle room, it was a noose, and I graciously complied. "It would be my pleasure." "Right, well, I'll leave you ladies to it. Olderenshaw, Detective Barnaby is one of our very finest officers. You'll learn lots from her. I'm just nipping down to the canteen. Can I get either of you a protein shake? No, very well." And off he marched, shoulders back, head high. I tried not to roll my eyes and gestured to the cadet to sit down as I cleared space on my desk. As the police, we dealt with all breaches of law and order, except those involving magic. Those cases were handled by the practitioners themselves. I had reservations about 2 tiers of judicial oversight, but that was well above my pay grade. Right now, my job was to help this cadet sort the wheat from the chaff. "Right, let's go through these one by one and you tell me if you think we should handle the case or if it should go upstairs." She took a deep breath, looked at me nervously, and then opened the first folder. Agatha Smith, accused of making a man have sex with her after a night of clubbing by the use of magical enticement. I rolled my shoulders. This one was child's play, but it would be interesting to hear her reasoning. What's your opinion? Ours or theirs? She took another deep breath and then sat up straight, preparing herself. Relax, it's just you and me. I won't be writing an assessment on your performance. She visibly relaxed and shot me a quick smile. Okay, here's how I see it. This case is ours. Some bloke is after a bit of revenge after getting wasted on a night out. Anything else? Well, given that the man is making false accusations of non-approved magic use, I'd charge him with wasting police time. I kept the grin off my face and nodded. Perhaps, but if this is the first offence, we can let him off with a warning and dismiss the case against her. She scribbled a note on the attached action sheet and then opened the next case file. Mr. and Mrs. Webster won. Ours. I cut her off. We get roughly 50 to 100 reports of magical manipulation every time someone wins a jackpot prize. You'd be amazed at just how many friends and family aren't actually cheering on your every stroke of good fortune. Besides, all winners of prizes over a certain value are automatically checked by the practitioners. What was the amount? 100 grand. I whistled. Nice for them. Anyway, they will have been pre-checked. The practitioners get really crabby if you send reports up like this. It's a waste of their time, and by the end of the day, they will make you bitterly regret it. She looked at me, her eyes wide in alarm, and I noticed she had perfect teeth as her jaw dropped. Do they curse you? By the time you emerge from all the counter paperwork they send to reverse your decision, you'll wish they had. The only cursing will come from you. We ran through a few more examples and then paused at a more unusual case. Does it say he blew up a traffic light just by looking at it? She checked the notes again. Yes, Timothy Crowe, age 47. After the lights blew up, he was reported to have shouted, "I did it! See, I did it!" When questioned how he did it, he said he had worked out the right words by himself. What's his job? Bus driver. According to the notes, he has made several complaints to Highways Division for inefficient signalling relays. I had my sympathies. Getting around London in rush hour was a nightmare, but we were still in the realm of coincidence and delusion. I pulled the case notes and had a quick read-through before returning them to her. What are your thoughts? Ours, she said with confidence. Fantasist. You don't suddenly become a practitioner in your middle age. I stayed quiet and she looked at me nervously. Theirs, what have I missed? A few things stand out. Look at his education. What did he major in? Magic. She groaned, but she tapped her fingers on the desk. But that's not enough, is it? Lots of people study magic. Doesn't mean they want to be practitioners. I did it as a minor. I was always curious about people who voluntarily studied magic. If the option was to study magic, or be dragged backwards through a vat of rancid milk without a nose plug, I'd be lying down in that pool of fermented curds and whey before they could offer me goggles. But that's just me. I have a troubled relationship with magic. My surprise must have been clear, because she nodded proudly. I did my degree as a science minor, chemistry, biology, magic, physics and geology. She didn't strike me as a scientist, but then lots of people come into the police force from various walks of life. Daddy was furious. He said if you wanted to get ahead in life, you needed to major. Focus, focus, focus. But Mummy said that committing too early was foolish. So your mother won out? I liked hearing people call their parents Mummy and Daddy. It reminded me of home, where that terminology was more usual. It was nice to have at least one or two decent memories of home. But of course, here it simply meant her parents were probably loaded. She laughed, now delighted at my statement. They both won. For my second degree, I majored in history. And now you've joined the police? I imagined her parents were furious. Don't get me wrong, it's a noble profession and all that, but not what her parents had in mind. Why the police? I wondered what on earth this clearly very bright, privileged woman was going to say. Was she looking to make commissioner, a fast track to the top? Diplomatic services? Practitioner liaison? I want people to be safe and happy. I tried not to laugh. Her earnestness was astonishing, but also, I'm not embarrassed to admit, a bit endearing. I looked at all the ways I could help, and I felt the police force really gets to the heart of any situation. She was going to find out that the vast majority of criminals were not hard-done-by victims looking for a way out. They were happy to have a go, hardened scroats. I meant the victims, of course. The perpetrators can go hang for all I care. I raised an eyebrow. Personality muting is harsh enough. No need to hang them as well. Well, Daddy says that we still have to feed them, and that's an expense we could do without. The vast majority make it back to a fulfilling life. I knew I was trotting out the party line, but in my mind, neutering the mind or a murderer or rapist just felt like they'd got away with it. Still, I reminded myself this way was best for everyone, except maybe the victims. When did you know you wanted to be a police officer? As soon as I finished my minors. So why take a second degree? To ensure I passed selection, I needed to make sure they wouldn't overlook me. My God, this girl was driven. You weren't interested in becoming a practitioner. The prestige involved in being a practitioner was tremendous, as was having one in your family. The premature death wasn't a guarantee, but the death rate amongst practitioners was way above acceptable tolerances. But when your work provided free energy, it was amazing how acceptable tolerances could change. Of course, practitioners could work in any field, but the risk of disaster had become so great and so commonplace that the use of magic was now tightly regulated. After the final debacle in the cartography department in Oxford, practitioners were regulated and only allowed to practice in a few fields. You'd think such restrictions would create a subdued and mindful individual, but that would show that you'd never met a practitioner at the height of their power. Rich, arrogant, complacent. Don't you like them? Asked Ollerenshaw. Daddy says they are worth their weight in gold. Without them, we'd be reliant on energy from renewables, oil or nuclear. Can you imagine? She laughed at the folly. Magic is limitless, free, clean, and so powerful. She paused to grin at me sheepishly. That said, magic gives me the willies. It's either really boring or utterly terrifying. She laughed again and looked at me expectantly. I couldn't help but agree with her assessment. Ever since practitioners had managed to store wild magic and harness it into an engineered form, it had become the principal supply of energy. There was nothing glamorous about it, it just worked day in, day out. That was the mundane side. Then there was the wiping of people's minds, splitting the earth, bringing the dead back to life side of it. Or, as Ollerenshaw put it, the utterly terrifying stuff. Those aspects of magic, though, were highly regulated and certainly not understood by those not trained as practitioners. We just said thank you for making the computers work and keeping the kettles boiling. I don't care about them one way or the other. They do a dangerous job and get well rewarded. Every person has to follow their own path. Historically, anyone could have a go at practicing magic, but over the centuries the practice had become refined and improved, and with that improvement, more dangerous until at last it was finally regulated, and only authorized personnel could practice magics. In fairness, trying to tame wild magic into engineered magic was bloody dangerous and deserved to be closely monitored, and yet I felt the practitioners daily overreached. I returned to our previous subject of Ollerenshaw's overachievement. I didn't want to dwell on magic. You know, you didn't have to study so much for the police force. You could have just applied through the open entrance exams. These were open to all and no evidence of education was required. It was designed to make the force as inclusive as possible. If you passed the entrance exam and the interview, you were in. No one asked where you came from, what grades you got, who your folks were. So long as you didn't have a criminal record, you became one of His Majesty's finest. Oh my God, who on earth comes in that way? Daddy says that's just a PR exercise. Can you imagine the sort that tries to join the police that way? Me, I said tightly. I applied that way. I have no qualifications and at the time had no fixed abode. It's not a PR exercise, it's a lifeline. I picked up the case file again. Let's look at Timothy Crow again.